Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about what, in my opinion, are the top 10 best zones weapons in the game. This is going to be a bit different from other videos I've done. I have done things like tier lists or discussions on weapons before, but the difference between this video and those is that this is going to be entirely based off of my opinion. So the ranking of these weapons was entirely chosen by me, and how I think these weapons stack. Because of this, of course it could be wrong, you could disagree, and that is completely fine. But I want to give what I think are the top 10 weapons in the game right now for Splat zones, because Splat zones is the most developed mode, the most understood mode, and overall the most common mode for competitive play. So I think it's the easiest one for me to rank all the weapons in. Regardless, all of these weapons are insanely close to each other, so the difference between number 10 and number 1 isn't as big as other lists would be for other games. So, let's get into it. Now, the first main weapon I want to get into here is actually one of the best main weapons in the entire game, which is the Dark Tetradulies. Now, Tetradulies are an insanely strong frontlining option. They have amazing kill power, mobility, and are overall just one of the trickiest things to fight. They have an insane matchup spread that makes it very difficult for other weapons to beat them because of their effect, because of what makes Tetradulies so good. It has better range than most shooters, so it is able to commonly outrange stuff. It doesn't kill too slowly, but the main thing that makes this insane is how far ahead the dualie's rolls are compared to any other dualie or even mobility option. You can shoot while dodge rolling, which no other dualie can do, and on top of that, you can roll 4 different times. Now, you do have a lot of end lag after the 4th dodge roll, so it is punishable, but due to your amount of range and the ability to just delay the 4th roll sometimes, it can be really easy to just play around that if you know what you're doing. The weapon in general is still really difficult, but it has 2 issues that keep it from being ranked higher for me, despite being one of the best main weapons in the game. Its painting isn't too good, and its kits are very bad. That is the main problem for it. Having a bad kit can really be a big downside, especially for a weapon as strong as this one. Overall, its special is next to useless, and its sub isn't going to be something you use terribly often outside of a few poking situations. Its second kit is even worse and isn't even going to make this list because of it, but both the kits are absolutely horrible. However, it can be worked around somewhat because of how strong the weapon is. On top of that, because of how little special output it's going to be doing, relevant specials, and painting power, it needs to be getting a consistent supply of kills or pressuring opponents out of position in order to be relevant during a game. So, because of this, it has to play much more aggressive. It's not really too gear dependent, so you'll either see these things with quick respawn or main power. Main power allowing it to potentially 3-shot, and quick respawn allowing it to be less punished if it goes in and then doesn't end up getting the kill it wants, because then it can get in a little bit faster. But that's number 10. Next up is another really strong main weapon, but with a bit of a better kit. So, this is a weapon that's honestly came from being seen as a meme weapon when it originally was released. It was never a bad weapon, but just kind of the other weapons that are similar to it were very difficult to take seriously. Bamboo is one of the most insane weapons in the game, but when it's often being compared to Goo and Squiff, it was hard to be taken seriously. Finally, with the addition of main power up to the game, along with some meta changes to make missiles good, Bamboo finally got its time in the sun, and right now is one of the best zone weapons in the game. It has the ability to do 99.9 damage at about rapid pro range, which is absolutely insane. It's the only charger that has killing capabilities that are absolutely insane at a frontline level, and it has amazing painting capabilities despite it being a charger. On top of that, missiles are a great special weapon, not only in general, since they can disrupt the entire team and is incredibly valuable right now, and you can get them quite often, but also because it will help it secure kills, and the tick damage is very useful. Overall, this has insane potential as a weapon. It overall requires a lot of accuracy, but the amount of damage you can do at such a high range, along with being a solid weapon throughout, definitely places it higher. It has some issues fitting into a few different comps, and overall can still struggle if you're not too strong with the weapon, but it's still incredibly good as a whole, and I think it definitely has earned its spot on this list. Next up is a weapon I'm probably going to have to explain because a lot of people are going to be expecting this to be higher on the list, and that is the Kensa Splattershow Pro. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind is Splat Zones is by far this thing's weakest mode. And another thing is that at optimal zones play, Kensa Pro is being played around a lot more. It doesn't have as bad pain as Tetra, but it's still weak, and while its kit isn't as bad as Tetra, Booyah Bomb still isn't too exceptional for zones given the amount of output you need. so it still needs to get kills and it can't run quick respawn. It's still just incredibly fast at getting those 2-shot kills, but there are a lot of weapons that have survivalist methods higher up on the list, or angles that can allow it to deal with Pro better. So Pro can still struggle against some of the higher weapons on this list. And in general, it does need to be more aggressive. You'll notice the top tiers of this list can get away with being passive due to how strong the main weapon can be paint-wise or special-wise. This weapon can't really do that as easily, and that's why it's lower. If this were any other mode, I would be placing this at the top of the list, but with how Zones is played and how objective-oriented it can be, there are situations where the Pro strengths aren't going to shine, and it has to be pushed into an unfavorable situation. Again, it's still an incredibly strong main weapon, but I think it's slightly weaker in Zones, but we'll have to see. I think the more time goes on, the more it's going to be played around, and even if it's not played around too much right now, I think the potential to play around it for Zones is there, and that the higher up weapons on this list have a lot more things they can do to play around these options. Next up, we're going to get into one of the most mobile weapons in the entire game, and that is not this ink brush, that is this ink brush, the Ink Brush Novu. Now, the Ink Brush Novu is a 160 points for special baller with an insane kill time due to its ability to be used with quick mashing capabilities to kill opponents fast. On top of that, it has some of the best paint in the entire game. But one of the main things that makes this weapon strong is it's really hard to shut down when it has map control. It has the best mobility in the entire game, being able to move through enemy ink with its rolling capability without being slowed down whatsoever, and having a constant access to baller due to its low points for special and high paint, meaning it's incredibly hard to actually take out. On top of that, backliners and slower weapons can really struggle actually hitting this weapon. Charger is a good example of something that can have a really hard time hitting this weapon in general, but overall a lot of weapons can struggle actually hitting a brush, because it's very hard to hit a brush. On top of that, brush isn't too gear dependent, so it can run a lot of things such as swim speed, drop roller for its jumps, which is only really relevant for ink brush compared to other weapons, but it's quite useful for it, and a lot of just, again, charge up, allowing it to get its baller faster. Overall, this weapon's main weakness is the fact that when it's locked out, it's a lot less useful. It's very easy to shut it down and keep it from getting in. However, when an ink brush does get in, it's insanely difficult to shut down, and it pairs incredibly well with other weapons. In general, it's just something that can take enemy resources really well, and an insane kit for the weapon as mines can still help hold zone and are pretty relevant right now, but I don't think it's as good as some of the other weapons on the list due to how much it struggles when being locked out. Next up, we're going to get to the only backline weapon to ever stand up to a charger, main weapon-wise. And that is, of course, going to be none other than, if I can find a weapon with beacons here so I can sort this out and get to things faster. Something on a beacon, please. Beacon, 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 anything? Okay, I guess we'll sort by CE leader. So the Ballpoint Novu Splatling. Now, Ballpoint Splatling is probably the biggest jack-of-all-trades weapon that could ever be, but it has insane killing power at its long-distance mode with solid damage and amazing shot velocity. On top of it, its mobility, while not as good as heavy, is still fairly good, and its range is very close to that of Splat Charger. But how can this weapon keep up with Splat Charger is because it has this, a short-range mode that allows insane painting capabilities near it, allowing it to get special more efficiently and more often than a Charger, despite also being a 220 points for special weapon, and making it the least vulnerable backline in the game, since it has a quick option to deal with close quarters combat and insanely high mobility. This makes it really difficult to shut down in a Wear Ballpoint, since they have an option for dealing with closer range combat. Overall, it's an insanely strong backline. I don't think it's as good as Splat Charger, and I'll get into it when I talk about Splat Charger itself, more correctly the Firefin one for zones here, but I don't think it can be overstated how insane this weapon is as a whole, and how useful it is. It's also the best weapon for both Inkstorm and Beacon niches. So if you want either of those things, especially Beacons in your comp for zones, this is the best weapon you can choose for it. It's an amazing backline option that can totally work wonders for a team. Maybe even better than Charger for the right compositions. Now we're getting into the top 5, so this is where we're going to have to cover some really, really insane weapons. The first thing here that I want to talk about is the Soda Slosher. Now, Slosher has been consistently one of the most, well, I guess consistent top tiers in the game. Pretty much since the Deco variant has been released, Slosher has been a common top level pick, but the Soda Slosher has pushed the weapon a lot further than the 220p baller can. The Splat Bomb allows insane combos, as it can basically kill anyone without a sub bomb defense with a bomb and a slosh, which is incredibly powerful. Having a sub-weapon to poke can be incredibly useful in general, and Slosher is one of the most insane weapons with the ability to flick shots to handle close quarters combat, angle pressure over walls and surface, and overall just difficult terrain way better than any shooter player could ever hope for. And its special has a unique use since it can combo with the main weapon incredibly well for super fast killing potential, and can be used to rapidly paint a zone quickly for contagion. Overall, it's an incredibly strong main weapon that has the tools with the bomb combo, with the angles, with the flicks, to be able to deal with a lot of combat scenarios with any kind of shorter long-range weapon, and can poke better than other weapons can in a lot of scenarios. It overall makes it a staple for stages with a lot of angles, such as Sturgeon or Humpback, and in general just goes to show how strong this weapon is at dealing with this kind of thing. It can be difficult to take out, and a lot of weapons struggle with it. It's just an insanely good main weapon all around. Next up is one of my favorite weapons here, and that is going to be the wonderful Sorel Umbrella. And the Sorel Umbrella has kind of taken over zones over the Hero Umbrella. The Hero Umbrella still is used on some maps, but the Sorel Umbrella definitely has a better kit for what's being used for zones. Autobomb is nice for poking, but not really the relevant point. It can get special fairly quickly with the 180p special for Bomb Rush, but the main thing Bomb Rush allows it to do is A, hold areas well, which is what Umbrella does. It likes to get somewhere really annoying to take out, kind of like a brush, but not mobile. And Bomb Rush allows it to stall out and break ballers, and allows it to break armor, and it makes it incredibly difficult to approach. On top of that, like Soda Slosher, it has combos off of the Splat Bomb, where the 30 damage hit can make it really easy for you to one-shot at a mid or close range. On top of that, Umbrella is just an insane weapon at dealing with 1v1s and dealing with some of the stronger weapons, such as L3, which we'll get into later. It's an incredibly good main weapon, good for painting, good for killing, and overall can deal with a lot of weapons. It still has trouble in 1v2 situations, and if you're not good at stalling out those kind of situations or forcing enemies to use their specials on you, they can be difficult. On top of that, lockouts are still pretty hard for it, since it relies on positioning a lot, and not having said position can make it really easy to be double-teamed, flanked, or in general just taken advantage of for the main weapon's weaknesses. On top of that, it has a lot of inconsistency problems, which means some weapons can stall it out, and it has trouble dealing with some weapons like Charger because of its shield-breaking capabilities. Regardless, it's definitely an insanely strong main weapon, and definitely one of the core things to watch out for on zones. Lockouts from this thing can be incredibly difficult, its matchup spread can be very useful against some of the top tiers, and it has the ability to deal with a lot of different meta specials and meta weapons in a very good way, overall cementing its spot. Next up is the Firefin Splat Charger. Now, I will say here, I'm going to combine the scoped and unscoped variants. I don't think there's enough of a difference to where these things deserve to be differently ranked. Both of them have their uses, and both of them have their strengths. The ability to hold a charge is incredibly useful, but so is the extra range. So, it's really up to personal preference. Some people may argue there's a difference between the two, but for one, I'm not going to really dispute it too much. I think they're both pretty damn similar, and I think either one can work. So I'm going to count them together for this placement. Regardless, this is definitely one of the best main weapons in the game, and the best backliner. For a really solid charge time, it has the ability to one-shot and put insane pressure on distance more than any other weapon can. When a charger's in a good position, the area they watch over can be an area where you can instantly get one-shotted and killed from across that stage, and that makes it incredibly difficult to deal with. Being able to move Charger out of position or deal with it properly is very important in fighting this thing. On top of that, Wall allows it to get out of some sticky situations and have a little bit of a better job positioning or getting in the right spot. On top of that, Suction Rush is incredibly useful for gapping zone, and this is by far the best main weapon to be equipped with it. Dealing with Suction Rush on the zone can be really hard to hold since you can time the suctions differently and place them in the back of zone to detonate at the same time as others placed near the front, meaning it can be really difficult even with weapons that can outpaint it, since they can blow up at the same time. This means you really have to watch when Charger has its special as well. Close quarters combat is vulnerable, but if you have insane aim, it can be dealt with pretty well, and top-level Chargers have shown this before. It's a really insane main weapon, and almost number one on this list. I think it's incredibly good, and I think once more it will continue to be pushed and possibly be placed even higher in the future. It's just a weapon with a lot of potential. That's what a sniper is. Next up is the only armor weapon left that is still good on the majority of map and modes, and that is the hated by all Splattershot Jr. Now, the Splattershot Jr. is really only good in zones since it's the only one where it can get away with its passive play. Even then, it still needs to be able to aggress at some times and take care of engagements. Overall, bomb poking isn't as strong as torpedo spamming ever was with undercover, but it's not a poor option due to the increased ink tank and the double bomb capabilities. On top of that, it gets a lot of armors. Armors are arguably the best special for zones right now, alongside missiles. The difference is you can get a lot of armors compared to missile weapons, and it gives your team a huge opportunity to push in. It helps counter a lot of specials, and just overall makes engagements easier. It's a pretty core staple. Right now, Junior isn't an absolute necessity, or I'd definitely be placing it number 1 on this list. And it could be falling off depending on how things change. But overall, it's still an incredibly easy and effective team-based support, and I think it's definitely still kind of unknown how far this thing will go in the future. Personally, I see it falling off as teams adapt to armor and start to realize a bit more about how to abuse the lack of main weapon strengths. But in general, like K-Pro for other modes, I see this weapon getting nerfed in general because of the ability of passive play is still not really good game design-wise. It's still really strong for zones, but it's a weapon that doesn't require much skill, especially compared to some of the other top tiers on this list. So I definitely think we could be seeing a nerf to it. But regardless, as it is right now, I think it is definitely a staple for zones comps, and overall is a really strong main weapon. However, I don't think it's the best. And that title for the best main weapon in zones is gonna have to go to the vanilla L3 Nozzlenose. Now this weapon has been good in zones for quite a while lately, and even got a bit of a nerf with the 190 points for special, but I think people truly underestimate how insane this weapon is. First of all, only a pure of main power-up allows you to do 99.9 damage incredibly quickly, meaning if you are accurate and an opponent is weak, they will die. On top of that, it has the best painting in the entire game, allowing it to paint super well and have a mid-range, meaning it can paint at a distance much more safely and get its ballers safer than other weapons on this list, such as the Ink Rush, which allows it much more opportunity. On top of that, it has good mobility and solid range, allowing it to both outrange and outmaneuver weapons with shorter range in it, and be able to deal with some of its more trickier matchups by abusing this, such as Umbrella. In general, it's a really strong main weapon, but its kit also helps. Curling can be used for mobility to both help get in and out of situations. While it's not the strongest sub-weapon, it works fairly well with it to the point where it's good. On top of that, the baller spam can really help combo into a quick 2 or 3 shot, and overall can help start pushes since you can get them fairly often. I think this is the best main weapon in the game purely because of how many things it can do. It has the 3-shot potential of Pro, though admittedly with not as much range, but it makes up for it with its insane capabilities of painting and a stronger kit. I think L3 is currently the best weapon in zones, and I think this is why. It just is insane overall and doesn't really have many problems. It can struggle dealing with some weapons such as Umbrella, or maybe just in the right situations can be an issue, but overall the main weapon has an insane amount of potential and an insane amount of strengths, to the point where I feel it definitely belongs at number 1 on the list. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with my list? If not, what weapons do you think are better or worse? Let me know, and we'll see how this changes. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye-bye.